Alright, it feels like it's been a year since the last episode. What's the holdup now?
We're waiting on Cap. He told me to meet him here at, well, right now.
Yeah, he told me the same thing this morning when he calmed.
He's probably just running late again. He'd be late for his own wedding.
Don't you mean funeral?
In his case, it's the same thing. What? Like you guys weren't thinking that?
Busted.
Yep.
Yeah, me too. Oh, I think I hear the turbo lift.
That must be him now. About time.
Okay then, we'll finally have a show again. I think people were forgetting about it.
This is going to be a show they won't forget.
That's right. Tonight is the interview with Dan Stahl.
Right. And it's also our special holiday extravaganza.
What's so special about it?
I'd have to say that would be me.
Oh no.
You have got to be joking.
Chalaski, how's it hanging? What's up, my man?
Where's PF?
He'll be along in a little bit. He had to run an errand for me. He owed me from last month when he put in that special order for the Andorian twins that...
Really? You have new stock?
Who? What twins? How come nobody tells me anything?
It's really nothing. Nope, nothing at all.
That's not what Cap told me. He was pretty amazed when they...
Enough. Alright, we get it. We're on the air. Just leave it for now.
Never mind. Let's just get the show going. It's gonna be the best show we've ever done.
Because I'm here.
Hey, Chalaski, since you're going to be here on Primetime,
He means the Chalapalooza.
think I can get a special discount for trading in my used...
Kirkvat? Shut up, Chalaski. Go over there. Do something productive. Just don't get in our way. Hang in there, everyone. We'll be back with Primetime UGC's holiday extravaganza on the other side. Chalaski, put the girl down.
Season 7 released to the holodeck, updated Foundry player rewards, and much more in tonight's jam-packed news.
Coming up after Primetime UGC is this week's Quadrant-Wide Cinema, where you get to sample the best interspecies entertainment available. We're all grateful to Don Dathan for calling this meeting. We all know him as a modest man, although this is the first time we've ever actually met. Yes, too modest. He had all the judges and politicians in his pocket and refused to share them. A refusal is not the act of a friend. Surely you could submit a bill for such services. After all, we're not communists. Santino, his suit red. Huh? Luca, when the fishes slept. What the hell are you talking about? The old man's freaking crazy. Michael and McCluskey and Louis in the Bronx. Bazzini, his army. I told you, there's no reasoning with him. Bafangul! Waltz, his horse head uncovered.
And now, the news. Season 7 was released to the holodeck. This update brought many features that had been touched on previously in other reports, and it also brought, as always, downtime for the Foundry. By this time, of course, this has been resolved, and as of now, editing and reviews are now available for players, as well as tipping. Go forth and tip your favorite Foundry author. The Vesta-class ship was released. This is another bundle reminiscent of the Odyssey one, with variants for each division, and with consoles to go with them. Account linking is now mandatory for all players. You must have a linked Perfect World account in order to now continue playing the game. And the Foundry Spotlights. Before the downtime, we had spotlights of Klingon Mission, Dead Men Tell No Tales by Avarius, and Left to Die, Federation Mission by Bazag. We also have had 2 Ask Cryptics, the November one, which was a decidedly Foundry-free affair, but the December edition had quite a few tidbits, some of which are mentioned in tonight's interview. There's a PvP Bootcamp guest blog on the site by Sargon. Visit STO's main site for more details on this community event. The STO Gateway is now also officially released and out of its initial beta. The Tribble Test Reward has been released. This is a Romulan Tribble that gives a Romulan mark, as well as some buffs against Romulan weapons. The holiday event is live through the end of 2012. This event has a number of smaller running events inside of it, but the main draw is the ability to procure a Breen warship. Starbase feature projects. There have been 3 of them since our last broadcast. The ability to add Morn and some dilithium traders to your starbase, a dance club area for Federation, then a conference area for Clinks, as well as a costume display for Federation, and a weapon and items added to the starbase interior for the Klingons. Also, with the addition of embassies with Season 7, there have been 2 embassy projects. One, a Nanov tank, which is a little squid-like creature native to New Romulus, and a ancient relic display that can be set up inside embassies. Foundry Reward updates. There has been a Foundry Reward update. Previously, you had to play 3 missions in order to get 1440 dilithium. This recently changed. In fact, it changed after our recorded interview with Dan Stahl to be 1 single mission awarding 960 dilithium and 50 fleet marks. This is a repeatable mission, so every 30 minutes when the countdown timer expires, you are able to run this mission over again. And finally, a multitude of interviews occurred with the launch of Season 7. Priority 1 had a number of interviews, including a follow-up to their trip to Cryptic, as well as a secondary interview with Captain Gecko. Dribbles and Ecstasy interviewed Brandflakes. There have been a number of features for Star Trek Online inside of Star Trek the Magazine, including a Foundry feature featuring Starbase UGC's own pet dog, Cerberus Films. Massively interviewed Daniel Stahl. MMORPG interviewed Dan, as well as freetoplay.com, as well as MMOBomb.com. And also he's interviewed by a program known as PrimetimeUGC. More on that. Brandflakes was interviewed by The Verdict. Thomas the Cryptic Cat was interviewed by Subspace Communicator Online. And Subspace Radio visited the PWE offices. And that's the news.
Hi, everybody.
Okay then, so we're just going to jump in and ask questions then, and see where it all goes. Feel free to elaborate, go off track, and do everything that you like to do. We probably will.
That's fine with me. To me, it's real. If we can keep it conversational, and feel free to, ask follow-up questions that you have, or really just, let's just talk about Star Trek Online. Some of the things I'll have a lot of good knowledge about. Some of it I won't. And so if it's something that I don't know a whole lot about, I'll probably hem and haw and or I'll just say, you know what, I don't have all the details on that. But if it's something that's related to the game, I probably have a little bit of idea about what's going on.
And worst case, we can edit out any
silliness.
Make it.
Okay.
And the thing that's just a long silence, we'll just go no.
Okay, that sounds good. Have you guys been playing recently?
Yeah. Well, I've been fooling around in the Winter Wonderland, having some fun there.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Glorious.
It is much different than last year.
Is it? I didn't play in the event last year because that was during my my vacation away from Cryptic, and so I didn't really get to play during the event. I played it afterwards. I went on by myself, but I couldn't get a good feel with it. Does it feel all that different to you guys?
Well, yeah, that gazebo is great. For one thing,
it's wonderful, really, really wonderful. But it's kind of different when you have a snowman just suddenly going, "Oh, hello, I'm pelting with a snowball."
Yeah, that's fun. I'm glad they added that. That's kind of cool. The race is kind of tough though. It seems like the race is a little bit harder.
Yeah, I had a chance to play the fastest thing on ice or something. The one where you race against an NPC, and that spider is fast.
Yeah. That one has always been brutal, and now there's the player one with the Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, that one's kind of tough too. That one's kind of hard to win.
Right, so who wants to ask the first question about Foundry? I hope you've been buffing up.
Oh, so if we're going to talk about the Foundry, that's one of the things I'm not going to be able to talk a whole lot about the Foundry. I know that you guys are UGC fanatics. You're going to know way more than I do, but I can talk a little bit about theoretical stuff about the Foundry.
Well, and theoretical is some of the stuff that we need / want to go over.
Okay.
Because the future.
So, Cass, do you want to start?
I'm afraid to start with any of my questions.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. We'll start with something we got from a couple of players. Can you tell us anything concrete or anything rough, anyway? Because I'm sure it's not concrete yet. About what types of Neverwinter tech we're going to be seeing coming to STO after Neverwinter launch? Because we've seen all sorts of shinies and pretty things coming out from them. Just wondering how much of it, if any, will actually be coming over to SEO?
Well, that's a great question, and the way that the Foundry exists right now in both games is they are two separate code branches, and this is probably a little bit more technical than you probably care about. But the idea is that the Foundry in Neverwinter is different than the Foundry in Star Trek. We had at one point, we're trying to develop them in concert, and so we had one team sort of trying to do it for both, but Neverwinter got so crazy that we had to basically, in order to keep our Foundry functional and keep it so that people could keep using our Foundry without having these long periods where they were rearranging things, we had to essentially separate the two. Now, that said, we're all still in the same engine, and all of the features that can be in Neverwinter could eventually be in Star Trek, so long as the underlying systems, the game systems, work. So, for example, some of the bells and whistles that you see in Neverwinter, like patrols, which is something that they developed, we've been able to pull that and port that back over into STO. And from a technical sense, that means merging back some code, making it work within our version of the game, and obviously they don't have space, so testing it for space, things like that. So that's an example of a feature that was not developed in Star Trek. It was developed in Neverwinter that we have been able to bring back over. And I believe patrols are live right now, right? Are patrols released?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
having a lot of fun with them.
So that's one of the bells and whistles that I thought was a really good bang for the buck, because you can do so many different things with patrols. It's almost like poor man's acting in a way, because you can have patrols do movement for your characters, so you can have them move from point to point. And so I thought that it was, cherry picking the features that we could do right away. That was one that was far enough along that we could say, okay, yeah, let's get this over. Now, some of the other things that they have, such as the interiors editor, where you can actually lay out rooms and go from room to room, That's going to, that's something that we want desperately, but is going to be very time consuming and challenging because they have literally spent a year developing all the interiors and all of the object libraries and all of the, all of the predetermined locations for everything. So that, I don't know if you guys have played with the Foundry in Neverwinter, but if you're in that beta, one of the features that they have is automatic object propping, where you can basically detail out a room with a click of a button, and it's all preset locations for props. And so features like that, they spent an enormous amount of manpower with several developers to make that happen. So in order to port that kind of feature over to Star Trek, we would have to spend similar amounts of time and effort to do that. And so pretty much anything that you see in Neverwinter is doable in Star Trek for the most part. It's just going to boil down to manpower and time once they actually get all of that done. So that's sort of the long answer for, yes, there are features that they have that we'll be able to put in STO Foundry, but right now they're two separate beasts, and we have to basically, I hate to use the term, but we do have to kind of cherry pick right now what we can do, what we can put in the Star Trek Foundry. It's not as simple as, as soon as they finish it, let's just copy it and it's instantly in Star Trek. It's more along the lines of we actually have to do the same work, but we save about 20 to 30% of the effort because the underlying UI and system is done. We just have to make the rest of the stuff work.
But it's nice to have a number sort of thing put to that, in sort of the amount of work that is saved, or how much work you actually have to put into copying it across. So I don't think everyone really appreciates how much effort it does take if it's already been created and you're looking at it and you think, oh, well, copy, paste, there we go, done.
Yeah.
Cake.
A lot of it, for example, the interiors. One of the things that we really want to do with interiors, for example, it takes an environment artist on the UGC team. It takes them time to go in and actually flag every individual wall piece, every door frame, and they actually have to tag everything and flag everything for what it can be used for. And so in addition to just the feature, there's actually a bunch of artists up there that are going through all of the assets and tagging them and flagging them so that they can, so that they know the rules around how they can be used in their interior editor. And so for us to do that, we would have to do that same work. We'd have to go through our interior wall kits and our interior props and do that same level of detailing and put the same sort of manpower to it. It doesn't automatically just take our interiors and make them work. We actually have to make, we actually have to save off all of the pieces that are used. And so if you've played around with any system like that, it's like taking individual door beams, wall frames, ceiling tiles, everything, and basically, it's all broken down into very small components and making that so that saving off copies of that so they can all be used for Foundry. So it's doable. It's just not instantaneous.
Thank you. Good.
Of course.
In that case, it would kind of lead into one of my questions, which deals with a bunch of the costumes that have been in the C-store since the so-called content drought.
Sure.
Starting with the TOS set forward, there's a lot of costumes that haven't made it in. Now, some advances have been made since we just got in all of the temporal ships within the last patch. But is there any plan in place to get any of these older costumes and stuff available in the Foundry editor for authors to be able to use?
I think we would like to be able to do that. The reason why it takes so long to put that stuff in there is because we actually have to pull people and devote them strictly to that task for a set amount of time. And so, for example, for every costume in Star Trek, you have to go in and make a copy of it, and then you have to go and edit all of the details behind the costume, and then you have to test it against all the various types of if you want it to not break and not be completely broken for different species, you have to go in and set the rules behind who can use it and who can't use it. So, for example, when we create a costume for players, we put a certain set of rules on it and says it can be worn by these species and it can be worn under these parameters, and it cannot be worn with the following costumes, and it cannot be, worn in conjunction with this, and here's what you can customize and here's what you can't customize. when you have a costume like that and you want to put it on an NPC, for example, you then have to go back and set up all those rules for every single NPC group. And so it's not just if it works for humans, it'll work for Romulans, Klingons, every critter group out there. Can you put it on a Tholian? Can you, there's a lot of things you have to go in and say, here's things that you can't do. Now, we could just put it in there and not put those rules on there, but then you end up being able to put, the winter coat on a Tholian, if Tholians were in there, for example, and you'd be able to make completely broken looking things. Now that's a trade-off we can consider, and we can just say, it's up to you to basically, say this is inappropriate or this is silly. But Matt, the previous character lead, wanted to make it so that you didn't have to think about that, and so he wanted all the rules in place. So we simply haven't done a whole lot of that because it's a lot of work, honestly. And so we've tried to spend our time where it will give the most impact, and the things that we can quickly convert, we do. But there are certainly some costumes out there that probably we could get in there. It's just that there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of different enemy groups that you could put them on. So that's kind of where it's at. Now, is there some costumes specifically that you're thinking of when you say that?
Well, the TOS set, like the doctor's uniform, the Section 31 uniform. Those are the first two, or probably the two oldest I can think of.
Yeah, there's quite a few things that sort of. I don't know if there are any specific things, because it's quite a mismatch that we've got on the Foundry at the moment. So we've got some things that are newish, kind of, and some things that are just really old, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of what has been added and what hasn't. And then occasionally we get the things added that are then taken away, so sometimes we forget them.
Oh, yeah, like the Bajoran set, and that's another one too, the entire Jupiter uniform set.
Yes, that's a big one, actually. We would really, really like that to be in. I suppose what comes from that is, I know you said your previous character design lead made the decision to make sure you had the restrictions on. Would you be willing to consider not doing that, and seeing how it goes, or perhaps just not doing it, putting everything in, and then maybe at some later date going in and re-tagging or whatever?
So that's something that Neverwinter is trying, and we're sort of looking at what happens. Part of it is, does it create errors? If you put something, it does. For example, you have these. Yeah, will it crash the game in some weird way? Like if you put this weird costume on something that it's not supposed to be on, will it actually cause enough alerts that it'll cause grief? So that's one consideration. But I'm not adverse to that idea, and it is something that we, when I was working on the Foundry and Neverwinter, that is one of the things that we talked about, is in order to get over that restriction, really that bottleneck, to get past that bottleneck, do we just, say, hey, use your best judgment. Yes, you can put a dog on your head as a hat, right? Like, it's like, like
that would be useful to me, I must say.
And it's like, for example, one of the things you can do in the Neverwinter editor right now is you can basically make a horse your pants, right? And so you can stand on top of horses. And it's like the question comes when you're allowing players to do that, how much will that degrade the game versus help the people who really want to use it properly, right? Will you end up with a bunch of screenshots around the web of people with dogs on their heads in Star Trek, right? And do people assume that's a bug that you created? And so there's a little bit of that to the question of why we haven't just opened it up. It's kind of one of those things where we're trying to find the right way to get through this bottleneck, and sometimes a lot of it just boils down to manpower and free time. For example, character artists, I've got 2 of them, and they're so busy that really it just kind of boils down to how much work can these guys do. And character artists on the STO team are sort of a support role in that we aren't thinking of like, okay, what's the next costume going to be? It's more like, what's the next thing we're going to do in the game, and what costumes do we need for that? So, for example, third year anniversary event coming up. What's the mission? What's the episode? Where are you going to take place? What do we need for that? And then the character art costume creator guys, they get a list of tasks and say, okay, we need these 50 uniforms and we need them in 3 weeks kind of thing. And so those guys basically are booked solid with just supporting the mission content that we want to do in the game. So when we look at the Foundry, the question comes out, how many people are playing Foundry missions versus the other content, and where should we be spending those two guys' time? It's just it's a tough business call, right? Because I would love to put every costume we can in there and have the time to do that. But really, the solution is doing it at the time that we create the costume, right? And at the time we create the costume, making sure that part of the process is making a Foundry version. And so that's more of the direction I'm headed. Is just working in more time into our future schedule so that when they do make a costume, the costume works for the Foundry.
Sounds like a good solution for going forward, certainly. It would help us out a bit anyway. If not giving us the old stuff immediately, it's certainly a great start.
The reality of where it's been now is it's been towards the end of a season. There is about a month of time when no one is scheduled for any specific tasks other than to fix their bugs. And so everyone will have, they'll have, depending on what they were working on, they'll have their own set of bugs to finish. And what we do is when you're not fixing bugs, we ask you to do Foundry stuff. And so we use that free time that people have in their schedule to say, look, if you're not doing this, let's put some stuff in Foundry. And so, for example, with season 6, we actually, I think Maria Zeronius Rex went on and started a thread saying, hey, what are some requests? We have a little bit of time. We're going to try and put some Foundry stuff in. That's how that actually happened.
That's cool. We've never heard about that sort of thing before. So it's nice hearing that when you do have free time, that people do it. Yeah.
So I kind of look at I'm looking at season 8 and when that's going to release, and I'm fairly certain we'll be able to get some Foundry stuff in there. And so a lot of it is just prioritizing. Okay, we can if we could do 3 costumes, what 3 costumes should it be, right? If we could do 2 new maps, what maps would they want to be? If we could do really do want to get the critter groups in there too. So a lot of it is getting the Tholians and the new guys that are going to be in season 8. Who I can't tell you who they are yet, but they have been featured in Star Trek though. They were an alien race that's been in at least one episode. I don't know if they've been in more than one episode. So I'll have to wait and see who they are. They're pretty awesome.
Absolutely great. It's something that ever since we got the Tholian ground missions and things where we had to bring out our EV suits, people have been really wanting to get sort of an EV suit mechanic into Foundry missions. And so far, some people have done it. And I've tried it out once, I think, where you tell people that you have to put your EV suit on now if you want your imaginary people are going to die. Is there any sort of idea of forcing limits, I suppose, giving the author the ability to force limits? Have to wear an EV suit on this map, or you have to be using a small craft like a shuttle, or is there any way to reduce the size of the away team that you take down with you, that sort of thing? Because we've had people doing bugs and sort of tricking it and doing everything that it really shouldn't.
Setting rally points.
Exactly, yeah. And sort of beaming people in halfway through a crate or in a corner. I think there was a time where there was a map where people they suddenly learned if you put the spawn point right here in this corner, no boss will spawn with you, and or something crazy like that. Is there any chance of us seeing that sort of thing coming in the near future, or is that on your radar?
The shuttle one's on our radar. One of the reasons we wanted to get default shuttle on there is so that we could add a map rule for shuttle gameplay, so that you could force people to be in a shuttle on a map. Because essentially what we're talking about is map rules, right? Like how many pets we call bridge officers pets. So how many pets can you have on your map? Does this require EV suit? Is this a shuttle map? all of those flags should be in the Foundry so that you can basically flag a map to say, oh yeah, this is a shuttle-only map. But in order to do that, the problem is that, we have to sort of put in fail-safes. What we don't want to do is we don't want to put in mechanics where players could trick. I guess we're just paranoid, right? Like, we're paranoid that someone's going to create a mission that's like, here, take this mission. Ha ha, we killed you. I put you in a map and you don't have an EV suit and I killed you. Ha ha ha. Not that mission would be very highly rated, but it would be nice if we had some fail-safes to say, oh, this is a EV suit map, so therefore put on my EV suit for me, kind of thing. This is a shuttle map, so use my default shuttle.
Like when you pick up the mission, it requires the EV suit, or you require a small craft sort of thing.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we put in the default shuttle tech in Season 7 is so we can move forward with things like map rules so that we can put that power in your hands so that you can flag a map that says, hey, this is a shuttle combat map. And another one that would be along those lines is this a PvP map, which would have its own set of rules and things like that? Or is this a static map, meaning that it's not an instance, that you can actually have a persistent zone? That would be pretty amazing, in that you could have a zone that is pretty much anyone can come and go from at any time. You could be in the middle of the map and someone could just come into the map in the middle of it. There's a lot of different rules that we want to put in there. We're just slowly getting it. It's hard to feel fast when, it's only been 3 years, but we'll eventually put all this stuff in there.
I suppose the question from that is when.
Yeah. My guess is that the map rules will be something that we'll put some effort into in 2013. Whether it's part of Season 8 or not, it's currently not on the schedule, but it's something that could easily get onto the schedule. Right now the way things have been running, we're so focused on this new mission content for Season 8 that we really haven't had any time to do anything else. But once we sort of get that done and get that sort of out the door, at least to the QA department, then we can start looking at this other stuff, like the map rules. Because it's certainly, the reason why we put that default shuttle in there is so we could do this. So it's certainly on our radar to do at least the shuttle map rule part. EV suits is just a different version of that, right? So it just means that we have to basically
you design the tech for one thing and then it kind of rolls into other types.
Yeah, the idea is that instead of an armor slot, you'd have an armor slot and then an EV suit slot. And you could have both slotted, and so that way if you're on a map that requires an EV suit, it would just use your slotted EV suit. And if you didn't have one slotted, it would use a default one. And so that way you don't have, that way the player you don't have to do the work of saying, okay, put your EV suit on, and then having to have we have to do these complicated checks, through, State Machine Editor right now to see if you actually have it on. We just want to automate all that, because we hate dealing with it too. I mean, we have to jump through quite a few hoops just to get it to work on our end as well. I mean, the editors aren't all that different. So if you're having a challenge with this stuff, so are we. And a lot of it is us getting in the tech to do that. We have to do a lot of shenanigans to do some of the things that we do. You don't necessarily spawn your crew in crates, but we've done some pretty strange things though.
Dev hat.
Yeah.
And I have kind of a twofold question here.
Sure.
Season 7 saw a lot of changes, especially to, I'll say, the dilithium economy.
Sure.
One of those changes being the changes to the Foundry wrapper mission requiring a certain time length.
Yes.
Which put, thankfully, an end to the console clicky missions.
Yes.
Yay.
But at the same time, a player can take an exploration cluster mission, like say in Delta Floronis or even Petran, and run those 3 missions in approximately a 20-minute time span and get about 1,400 dilithium. Whereas a Foundry author, the average run time comes to closer to 60 minutes for the same gain.
Totally glad you brought this up. This is actually something we are actively working on right now. So we are We've had a couple different meetings on this in the last week where we are discussing how we're going to address the sort of changes that we've seen in player behavior with the Foundry missions. Because our goal, I mean, let's be very clear, our goal is we want to reward players for playing Foundry missions, no doubt. We want it to be a good reward.
It's nice to hear.
We want it to be a good reward, and we want it to be better than playing exploration missions if the Foundry mission takes longer than the exploration missions. And so what we've been looking at right now is a couple different ideas, but the ultimate solution that you're going to see probably in January when we finally come back from the winter break and we get the code in game and get it fully tested. The idea is that we want to put a good enough reward on Foundry gameplay that depending on how long the mission is or how good the mission is, we want the reward to scale with it. And so we're looking at a lot of different ways to determine how that should be rewarded and how to keep it from being gamed. In other words, the Spotlight's one step towards there, but we kind of want all missions, whether they're Spotlight missions or not, to give good rewards. It's just been a very complicated thing. We've seen what happened with the clicky missions. If there's a way to exploit people, we'll find it. And so we're trying to find a way that's more bulletproof than others to be able to say, okay, the Betran takes 20 minutes, but there's this really good Foundry mission, it takes about 35, 40 minutes. That should reward better. And it should reward a lot of different things. I think it should give out. I think you should, my sort of pitch is I think it should have, again, this is my pitch. I don't know if this is what we'll eventually do, but I've thrown out, you should have a choice between here's some fleet marks, here's some dilithium, here's some gear. Let people sort of choose what they want as their reward. And so that way, no matter what item players are looking for in game, Foundry can be a solution for them. And so that way, you can, if you need fleet marks, go play some really good Foundry missions. If you need dilithium, go play some good Foundry missions. I really think that, we want to find a solution that's along those lines. And we are working on it.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Primetime UGC's mini-mission review. I'm the host for this episode. Okay, that's right, it's me, Crazy Chalaski. I know you're all excited to see this mission reviewed. It's called Slaves and Seductions by Kirkfed, and let me just say that this is one of the best missions I've ever played. It's the only one I've ever played, but that's because it isn't every day that you get to be surrounded by Orion slave girls. I mean you. I'm around them constantly. I'm Crazy Chalaski. It's what I do. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This mission has it all. Great combat and a very titillating story. And we had a ball running around in the steamy crevices of Kirkfat's imagination. He's one of my best customers. Most humans just don't have the stamina. He's a riddle, that one. Anyway, since I'm hosting this thing, I'm not going to do the category stuff that Captain P.F. Dennis always wastes your time with. I'm just going to tell you that this foray into fighting and fornication is a find for Foundry fanatics, so I'm giving the whole thing 5 stars. Count them. 1, 2, 3... Math is for people who don't avail themselves of my wares. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the mission as much as I did. This has been Primetime UGC's mini-mission review for Kirkfat's Slaves and Seductions. I'm Crazy Chalaski. Happy holidays to everyone. By the way, a strumpet makes a great last-minute gift. Till next time.
And hello Stowe community, welcome to part 5 of our Back to Basics tutorial series. In this tutorial I'm going to talk mostly about dialogues, and there are 4 types of dialogues that you can add to a Foundry mission. I've separated them into groups of 2. The first 2 you can think of as storyboard dialogues, right? Here's the storyboard, and there are 2 types of dialogues that we can add to the storyboard. That's dialogue with contact, which we've already done with talking to the Vulcan diplomat, and then there's also something called pop-up dialogues. Those we can add to the storyboard. And the reason that I separate these from the other types of dialogues is because they are mandatory. If they're part of the storyboard, it means that a player is going to experience them. They have no choice. Whereas the other 2 types of dialogues, and I'll show those to you in a minute. The other types of dialogues are optional. They don't have to be part of the player experience, and they can also be used in conjunction with triggers. And triggers will be the next tutorial in our set of Back to Basics tutorial series. So what I'll do is in this part 5, we'll talk about the basic storyboard dialogues. Then part 6, we'll get into triggers. And then part 7, we'll talk about the dialogues used in conjunction with triggers. So that's how we'll proceed. But let's go ahead and start. We've already put in a dialogue with Contact. It's talk to the Vulcan diplomat. The Vulcan diplomat is on the ground map. Now, when the objective is to talk to the Contact in the storyboard, it means that the player will physically have to find the NPC on a map, and the NPC will have an icon above their head to talk to them. The player will talk to the person, and that will be the task. The task will be resolved when the player stops talking to the Contact. And with the talk to Contact, right now she just says howdy. But if we click on this button, Advanced Dialogue Editor, that's where we can do things that are much more complex. So let's say we get to Vulcan and there's a murder to solve, and this diplomat is a witness. Then the first box, she can say, do you have any questions for me? And from that point on, we can add questions. Question number 1, question number 2, and so on. And then following each question can be a different response by the NPC, and you can even branch it further, giving the player choices of which follow-up questions to ask, and she could have different answers for different follow-up questions. But in the end, you'll probably want to have an extra button here that says I have no more questions, and then all the other boxes will go back up to the top, so that a player can ask each question and then decide, okay, I'm done asking questions. Now, the branching dialogues can get much more complex. They don't always have to go up. They can go to the sides. They can do really interesting things with puzzles. And when you start to mess around with making puzzles, you're going to learn how to do branching dialogue very quickly. But for now, these are kind of the most basic forms of branching dialogue that you'll be messing with as you start writing your missions. You'll also notice that there's an option here for success or failure. If you have a path down the tree of a branching dialogue and it results in failure, that doesn't mean that the player fails the mission. It means the player fails the dialogue, and they'll have to go through the dialogue tree again to try to find the right answer. So you don't always have to link something to another box. It could just end in, hey, you have to do this dialogue over again. Okay, so that's really the most basic type of dialogue. That's probably what you'll feel comfortable using first, is to put an NPC on a map, and then in the storyboard, put the task to interact with that NPC on the list of things for the player to do. Now, a different thing that you can do is, say the first task is not to talk to a person, but it's to interact with an object. Say it's to scan a console, and you're scanning a console for a clue. Well, in Star Trek Online, when the player scans something in the Foundry, nothing happens afterwards. It just, the scan is complete. So often what you have to do is you have to put in a pop-up dialogue, and usually this is your bridge officer on your away team or on your ship who has to tell you what you're seeing. And this is probably one of the most annoying parts of being a Foundry author, is if you play STO, you know that the devs have these generic icons. When a player interacts with a console or a computer, there's, say, a generic Federation logo, and they're reading technical information off a computer, or they're reading their tricorder, or something that's not their bridge officer speaking to them. But in the Foundry, because we have to use costumes following object interacts, usually our bridge officers have to say, Captain, my scans concur, I'm reading life forms over there, or Captain, allow me to translate this for you. There is a workaround, but it's not pretty. If you, oops, that's the wrong box. If you search for asset view, and you can search for prop, then you can get some of these non-sentient things, they never look good. I mean, as costumes, you'll get the legs of a costume, or you'll get the back of a generator, or you might get something that looks like this. And so they're not pretty, but if you really need a non-character costume for a dialogue, you can use these. I've used them myself. I don't really like how they look, but sometimes you have to use them. And like with the Talk to Contact, this has an advanced dialogue editor, but notice that you don't have the option on just a pop-up dialogue to fail or succeed. And the reason for that is the pop-up happens one time. It's triggered and a player reads it, and once they're done with it, it never comes back. And there's nothing a player can do to make that dialogue pop-up come back. So there's no reason that you'd want a player to fail it, because they can't redo it. And the last thing I want to show you here is if you have the NPC on a map and the NPC isn't part of a Talk to Contact story objective, so it's just, they're not over here, but they are just a character on the map. If you click on them, there is this box that says has default prompt. You can click on that, and that means that anytime that NPC isn't part of a task that the player has to do, then the player can still interact with them, and they say something like, the weather's nice today, or basically something that a city person might say, or a village person, or a pedestrian. That's the word I'm looking for. Is if you're wandering around a map and just randomly talking to people for clues, you can use these has default text as ways to give players clues. Now, in part 7, I'm going to show you some much more advanced stuff that you can do with this has default text, because if you notice, there are triggers attached to them. There are triggers attached to the Talk to Contact NPCs as well. But we'll get into that after I introduce you to triggers. Okay, and the last thing that I want to show you is the fourth type of dialogue, which you add directly to the map. And I already had one on there, which I didn't mean to. But if you're on the map tab and you're looking directly on the map, you'll see this. It's a blue bubble, it's pop-up dialogue, and you can add it to the map. Don't worry about this until you understand triggers, because the only way to use these effectively is with triggers. I mean, sometimes you can use them without triggers, but definitely hold off on messing around with these guys until next time. Okay.
That actually sounds, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like a really good idea if it scales and everything, yeah.
So it's like some of the ideas are is how should it scale? Does it scale by complexity? Does it scale by rating? Does it scale by the number of time it's been played with a good rating? Like, does it scale by average playtime? Does it scale by average number of creatures defeated? Is it an amount of dialogue? Like what is what is the sort of the most bulletproof way to make us analyze the mission and say this is the reward it should have?
I think it should, from my perspective anyway, it seems as though everything at the moment is more like the daily grind, as it's always been called. It always seems to be, takes a certain amount of time, so if you go and run BTran, you get X amount of dilithium in X amount of time, or if you do an STF or whatever, you get X amount of something for X amount of time. So if you were to run it off, say, the average time limit, because obviously if you did it off of the time that someone was playing a mission, I could see very easily how someone could game that, and they could just hang around to the map or just walk around for a while, for an hour, and get all the dilithiums.
Well, and that's sort of the idea behind the Spotlight mission, right? Like the Spotlight mission allows us to, anytime we recognize that this mission's great, the Spotlight will allow us to sort of make a copy and freeze it and say, sorry, this mission, sorry, Foundry Editor, this mission's frozen, but it's still credited to you. You got a new project slot to replace it, or a copy of it still exists in your project slots. And we can then put a very appropriate reward to it. And maybe that reward is different, right? But we can at least say this mission can give out 2,000 dilithium, or it can give out 100 fleet marks, or something along those lines where we can really make it a carrot that says, hey, this mission may take 40 minutes, but you're getting 2,000 dilithium from it, right? Like whatever the right equation is there to make it balanced and make it seem like it's a good deal. We want Foundry missions, especially Spotlight Foundry missions, to be a good deal. We want people to say, you know what, I need some dilithium. The best way for me to do that is to go play some really good Foundry missions because it's some of the best content in the game.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even realize that, thinking that they're just not up to par. We see it all over the forums all the time.
Yeah, and they really need, and so we want to put that big carrot there so that people can be, their eyes can be open to, yes, here's some really good missions. These missions rival, anything that we've done, and people don't play them because they don't have the rewards, and we are desperately trying to fix that.
And that answers kind of my follow-on to that, is that in the wake of the loss of the clickies, one of the big complaints is that Foundry missions are fan fiction at best, and, well, I won't say some of the interesting names that were thrown about. But are there any suggestions that have been put forward to kind of bring players to try more Foundry missions in addition to more shinies?
There's been several ideas thrown about in terms of how we could do that. I'll talk about a couple of those. One of the ideas is really the Spotlight Foundry and giving it prominence on the mission journal and really making the rewards so good that you have no excuse not to go play those missions. And that's probably the best carrot that we have, is to say, people, it's true, I mean, it's a game for a lot of players. And so for a lot of players, myself included probably, you sort of want to have fun and you want to work towards your goals, and you want to either get your rewards or you're looking for a set of gear, and you're going to find the best way to do that. And so if we can make Foundry one of the best ways to do that, that will help a lot. The other thing that's a little bit more esoteric and maybe a little bit more involved is I want to have a season that is all about opening up a sector that is only Foundry. One of the ideas on the table, and I don't know what season this is, but one of the ideas on the table is that we take the sector where I call it sort of the Founders of the Federation sector. It's this idea where you have Beta Z and Trill and Ferenginar and all of these. There's a part of our map between Federation space and Cardassian space where there's a lot of Federation planets that are IP to the Starfleet and the Federation. I want to basically put that sector in there, but make it so that all of the mission content in there is Foundry authored, so that you're going into an entire sector where we've provided all the assets, and we've sort of hooked up the doors such that when you go up to a planet door, it's picking Foundry missions that take place there, kind of thing. So it's a little bit of a high concept right now, but that's in addition to the carrot and putting the good rewards on the missions. That is one of the things we have considered doing. I think it would be interesting. We've riffed on that idea a little bit in some ways by saying that the question becomes, do you let authors build that content ahead of time, and then do we pick the best and then release it as a season? In which case, we would actually request certain missions to be made, and then we would have some sort of voting mechanism and say, think of it like you're a bunch of writers and we're a TV show, and we're saying, okay, here's the layout of the season, here's the bad guys, here's all the assets, here's the stories that we want to tell, and then you guys submit the script, and then we pick all the scripts that we like the best, and then those missions get made. Once they're made, they actually we hook them up to the sector. So that's...
I think we've had that idea bandied around our own community for 2 or 3 times in the past few years. Yeah. And every time we've come up with it, it sounds like a wonderful thing. So it's a great way for us to show our content and also get players interested in the Foundry and playing it.
And there was that talk too about doing the Klingon faction and filling that out at one time.
And that's another riff on that same idea, right? It's the idea that here's a sector, here's the things that we want here's sort of the rules behind what we want. It can't just be a bunch of Undine dancing around on Risa. It's
There's a place for that, Michelle.
There's a place for that. But if we sort of request it, then it'll get built, and we can actually, now that we have the Spotlight tech, see, so a lot of this is sort of baby steps towards it. Now that we have the Spotlight tech, now we could actually do something along those lines where we can say, here's the sector, and here's the missions that we've selected. We now know that the authors can't just go in and delete those missions, because they're mad. We've actually saved off a copy of them, and we've done all the right paperwork to make sure that the author knows that that's happened. And we actually have the ability for us to hook it up to the right planets so that we could take something like, let's do Klingon levels 10 to 20 and take the best missions and actually just make it a season. My hope is that we're going to do that. That's sort of what we're working towards.
Well, there is something that was also bandied about, a recent idea, kind of along the same vein, that we've been trying to come up with all these different ideas for rewarding players and getting them to play the content and everything, like you have. And with the release of Season 7, we had the reputation system sort of appear. And we sort of collectively came up with the idea of a Foundry reputation system type thing, so that you play content and, or that's say the average playtime of that mission. Once you completed it, you get so many Foundry reward marks or whatever, which then go into this content, which you could even create a whole, like you've done with the Romulan and the Omega stuff. You get all these different skill sets, you get all that sort of stuff. You could even give a proper, a whole different set, a whole different tree set for the actual authors themselves. So every time their mission gets played, they get a few marks that then go into the author tree and that sort of thing. Has anything like that ever been sort of considered or talked about?
It is one of the ideas that we have for how we want to do the new Rapper mission. One of the ideas is that we simply scale. That's kind of where I was going with the, you can choose your reward. Think
with the turning in marks and things currently.
Yeah, you turn in like Foundry completion marks, and then you can either get dilithium out of it or you can get other things out of it. And so there would be projects. The problem is the reputation isn't a perfect fit for that. But something along those lines, right? So something along the lines of there is a Foundry currency. And that Foundry currency represent your time playing Foundry missions, let's say. And then, simply playing Foundry missions, you simply earn this currency, and then you can spend it on rewards. That's really, we're going to do something like that. I don't know exactly what it is yet because there's a couple different ideas and they both require some software support. But once we pick the right one, and put it in game, I think it'll go a long way towards what you're talking about, where there is some structure to it. Now, the other idea is I really want to eventually, kind of going back to our idea about missions, is I really want to see journal tabs of good campaigns that people have created, where we can actually hook up special rewards to people's campaigns, right? So sort of my holy grail is author out there creates a really good 5-part mission series, and it's really good from start to finish. We basically flag the entire thing and give it its own tab in the mission journal and just turn it into premium content, put some real rewards on it, and credit the author and let people continue to donate, dilithium or Zen to that author. That's sort of another holy grail that we have to really give authors credit and visibility for their work. And a lot of that, to be clear, is happening in Neverwinter. And so some of that is sort of the features that we introduced in Neverwinter that I'm hoping they can probably do the heavy lifting for us on some of that stuff, and then we can just steal that 30% effort and get it a little bit faster than we could. Because some of the things that they're doing is they're doing things like subscribe. I think one of the features I saw was subscribing to authors, having author pages. So that way you can filter by author, or you can get alerts when someone posts a new mission.
It's basically like making your sort of an RSS
like a blog
feed type. Yes, blog.
Right.
Hopefully we should be getting some more information on that soon as well. Hopefully getting someone on from Neverwinter to talk about that sort of thing. So yeah, it's great to hear that you're wanting to bring that sort of stuff over. That it will be wonderful.
Yeah.
It was the that whole community aspect of it, and the whole idea of it makes a whole lot of sense in Neverwinter because, a Foundry author in Neverwinter is essentially a GM or Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
And so you want to be able to host your own campaign, and you want your friends to be able to follow your campaign. And so I think one of the ideas is that in Star Trek, we want people to be able to have their own series and really be able to have
link between the series sort of thing.
Yeah, link between your series, or basically say, here's my show, and here's all the episodes in my show. And so if you want to just subscribe to my show, and you'll get updates, and you'll be able to go to my show homepage and see all of the episodes in order and get a little bit more information than you currently do, and it's a little bit easier to parse. I think that's where we want to go.
And allowing us to sort of post all our machinima and all our fan art and things all over that too, just in game, it'd be lovely.
Well, that's the thing, though. Speaking about the community, is that not only do we do the missions, we do we try to advertise them as well. And that brings up the next question, which is like the 800-pound gorilla for a lot of us.
Take cover and run.
Is demo record ever going to be fixed?
So demo record, I think the problem with demo record, and I think I've said a little bit about this in recent months, is it was created as an internal. Previously it was an old tool that was created for marketing to make videos for marketing videos, and it was basically written by a software engineer who I don't even know if he's in part of our company anymore, and so. The problem is the only people using it, it was never really a supported feature. I think either Jared or one of the guys basically said, oh yeah, if you found the command to use that, he posted some notes about how it's supposed to work, but there's no one at this company working on that product. And so it's kind of one of those things where being able to use demo record, what I would rather see, we've all internally moved over to a cutscene engine, and that cutscene engine has replaced demo record for video purposes. So our marketing team now uses our cutscene editor, or they use After Effects, or they use a combination of the two. And so what I would rather see happen, I think what will get you closer to what you're talking about, is us actually putting the cutscene editor in the Foundry. And the cutscene editor in the Foundry basically is pretty fancy pants. It's basically like a Flash. It's like a Flash video tool that allows you to have a timeline. And just like any other video software allows you to do that kind of stuff. So that's, I think you're going to see that before you're going to see demo record fixed. Simply because I don't.
Will be good, yeah.
So that's the sort of the painful reality behind demo record. Now that said, it could be that there's some kind software engineer who's going to come in on the Christmas break and hear some pleas and going to do it as a Christmas project. I don't know. That can always happen. That can always happen. But
we'll send cookies. We'll send supplies. We'll do whatever is needed. But we'll send it.
But my fear is that the person who built it is gone and nobody knows what it is anymore.
All right.
But that said, there are other tools that we can replace it with, and the cutscene editor would be probably the best thing that we could do. Now, I'm not sure what you're going to do with the cutscene editor. It would be great to put cutscenes in your own missions, but kind of being able to record your own videos, it is a little bit of a challenge. And I'm sorry, I've seen the videos that you guys, at least some of you have made, and they're phenomenal. We watch them internally.
Well, actually, this show is all made in demo record and a video editor. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks.
If you ever need any closed testers for, just for that, we're the guys. Come along, we're fine. We'll put the rest of our lives on hold and just go and do that. That's fine.
Yeah, take all my vacation time.
You know what? We'd never touch the Foundry again. We'd just spend all our time in the cutscene tool. At least I would.
Well, I'd be the.
And that's the kind of thing where we can, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, we can. One of the things I would love to see that as we mature and as we get older, as a game. I would really love to see the ability for us to have sort of a Foundry workshop weekend where we could actually have people come to the studio and we could put you in the real editor and have you make some real missions and get an idea of what's there and so that way you have an even better idea of what you want.
That would be incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And so that way
I get there, but I'll swim the Atlantic.
We've we've thought about this a lot too. I mean, if there was any way that we could actually just open up our full editing tools and give them to you, to people that, select individuals, we've actually thought about that and looked into it. Unfortunately, the way our engine's built, it just won't, the security, it won't work. For example, we can't even work from home right now, because of the way security is. So everything has to be done in the building. Otherwise, if it wasn't, I would give you all access to the full editor and let you go hog wild, right? I mean, there's.
We have your records for that now. Yeah. Okay.
But in the meantime, I think we really should, we should be talking about, what are we going to do in 2013 to have a Foundry workshop and to get people into the office where, we can have a day or two where we really just put together some machines, get you in the editor, let you ask questions, let you, teach you how sort of to make some missions and just have fun and get it's a great learning experience. It's great for the community. It's great for the idea of getting a good grounding for what's needed in the Foundry from some of the people that love to use it the most. So that's something that I'm taking notes here. That's one of the things I'm putting on my notes is the UGC weekend.
That would be absolutely incredible. And
well,
if you ever need us,
those Neverwinter guys, they have so much more money than us right now that we'll just make them.
Just convince them.
that
okay,
helps.
we'll go and talk to Metalis.
Well, and I say that sort of half jokingly. The idea though is that with Foundry going to be in 2 games in 2013, there will actually the number of authors is going to get exponentially bigger too. So. We'll actually have more support to be able to say, hey, let's do this, right? Like let's actually have a content creators event. So
that'd be wonderful. And we're expanding Starbase UGC, our site, and also Primetime UGC. We're expanding over into Neverwinter as well. So we're really looking forward to everything Foundry. To be honest, we've got people who love everything.
And it's our own sort of version of modding, and it's just trying to sort of make it something that's approachable by everybody. But I tell you guys, I gotta wrap up here. We have our Christmas party coming up, and I actually have to get out of here. Is there anything else? A quick question I can answer any burning question before we go?
Would you like to say anything? Give any spoilers? Give any exclusives? Whatever you like to say. Anything you'd like to say to the community, or tell us, etc., etc. This is your time.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say because, I've said so many things. One of the things I think about a lot is that Star Trek Online has had quite a journey since it was first conceived. It was, with Perpetual first, and they had a lot of great ideas about what the game was going to be, and Cryptic sort of jumped in and literally saved the game, but we had a very short amount of time to build it. And in the time that we've sort of launched the game and up until now, it's been a challenge to keep Star Trek Online running, to keep the content flowing and sort of dealing with, all the business ends of things. But what's encouraging to me is that Star Trek Online is actually doing better now than it ever has. And it's phenomenal to see how perseverance, and even though we've had setbacks, and even though I've said that we were going to do things and then had my own personal dreams squashed by whatever, we continue to grow. The game continues to get better, and I look at what we're doing for Season 8, and it's the most ambitious thing we've ever done. And I just think that, I get to look at all the statistics that we don't share, and I get to privately sort of snicker to myself at all the success that we're having. And it's not just financial success, it's just game success. And looking around at the environment of what's happening in the MMO space, it's good to see Star Trek Online existing and growing at a time when it's just a really challenging time for MMOs. And so I credit a lot of that to the fact that Star Trek fans just love Star Trek, and Star Trek Online, warts and all, has been able to sort of fill a void in all of our dreams in terms of being able to exist and play in a Star Trek world without a TV show going on. There's definitely a lot of great books and a lot of great literature, and we've got new movies coming out. But right now, Star Trek Online is really fulfilling a history of Star Trek that is keeping it going, and fans have a lot to do with that. And so I'm just really hopeful. I know there's a lot of things that we all want the game to be. There's a lot of things that I've said I wanted the game to be that haven't been able to come to pass yet, but it really truly is continuing to happen. And you're going to see in 2013 us take on some of the things that I've always wanted to do, and we're actually going to do them. And I'm excited to be able to talk about those at some point. I can't give you any spoilers yet, but it's going to be fun to talk about them when we get there, and we'll just continue moving forward. But thank you very much for this time to be able to talk about the Foundry. Again, Foundry authors, really, if it wasn't for the Star Trek Foundry authors, I don't think Neverwinter would be getting as much excitement as it is, because I think the Foundry in Neverwinter is probably one of the most exciting things in that game. And I think a lot of that is, I don't think the Foundry was originally going to be in Neverwinter. But it's really the success that the Foundry's had on Star Trek that has convinced us that the Foundry is awesome and that we can continue to build this engine. And it really is a piece of software that's only about a year or so old. Once we get up to version, Foundry 8, then I think you guys...
Well, we're still in beta so far, so...
Exactly. So once we're at that point, I think you guys are going to have everything you've ever wanted, and we're going to keep building it.
That's gonna be one hell of a Christmas party.